All right. Good morning, Indigo. And thank you for joining us for the second day of this celebration of video games from the Benelux. I wanted to remind you, there's new people here who come for the second day. There's people who were here yesterday. The organization asked me to remind you that apart from this fine chat that we're going to have, there's a lot more good talks to see today, either here in this room or in the other rooms around the venue. If you want to have a clear understanding of what those things are going to be, check your badge. At the back of your badge, there's a QR code you can scan for the program. Apparently, this was set numerous times yesterday, but still people ask for it. So here's don't forget. So we're ready for a second day, and we will kick off with a fireside chat with a legendary developer. So full disclosure, if anyone's a frequent listener of the My Perfect Console podcast, this intro will seem quite familiar, but I think it's a very nice way to introduce a guest before a chat and give some context. So our guest this morning has had a front seat to the development of the Polish game sector for over 30 years. Being the brother and co-pilot of one of the Polish industry pioneers, he wasn't only there for every swerving corner, more often than not, he also held the wheel to alter direction. Wielding his pen as a tool, not a weapon, he went from writing the studio's earliest work to becoming head of communication and PR for some of 11-bit Studios' most well-known in-house titles, such as This War of Mine and Frostpunk, as well as published games like Children of Morta or Indica. A common thread throughout his work, more recently, he's been exploring how games can be implemented beyond entertainment, working on adapting Polish games to be used in Polish education. Welcome, Pawel Miechowski.
Hello. Very nice to be here.
So, Pawel, welcome. Thank you for being here. There is, like I said, 30 years of career spanning over 30 years. There's a lot of things to dig into, but before we go into all of the things you've been doing at 11-bit, we need to go back actually to the start of this story, back to the 80s in Poland, which is actually sooner than before I was born, before many of the people who in the room were born. So what was it like to grow up in Poland in the 80s?
Well, quite different to what we have now. As you know, it was a communist and Soviet-controlled country. Yet I grew up in a very special area, in a mining town, where there is a huge copper and silver mine, sponsoring different, up to date even, different institutions, and back then they sponsored computers for high schools. Okay. So the weird part is that despite being in a relatively poor country, we had access to computers, and my brother used to go to high school with Adrian Chmielarz. So later the creator of People Can Fly and Bulletstorm and The Vanishing of Ethan Carter at the Astronauts, and lately Witchfire. So I happened to grow up with two of the veterans. One was my older brother Grzegorz, and the other one was Adrian, who was his high school mate. And one day they borrowed a Spectrum ZX computer from high school. Okay. And that was, I think, 86, 7, something like this. Mm-hmm. So they brought it home, and over the weekend they programmed a super simple game, a logical one. And this is the moment where I fell in love with games, yeah, as much as they did, because just as the communism collapsed in I think it was 1990, they already started a company, Metropolis Software, which later happened to be one of the very first of game development companies in Poland. What is interesting is that, believe it or not, but we didn't have copyrights in Poland until, I think, 96 or something. Mm-hmm. So pirating games was legal. So
can you imagine?
This is weird. but it had huge influence over the gaming industry in Poland because people probably wouldn't be able to afford games, but pirated copies were super cheap. So it was relatively easy to get Commodore 64, maybe Amiga 500, Atari. Those computers were pretty popular, even smuggled during the communist era, because you need to know that the Western hardware was somehow getting to the black market in Poland. So people were buying computers, illegally copying and selling and spreading software. So in the early 90s, there was a ton of markets with games. Like, you could buy an entire cassette full of Commodore 64 games for really, like, 50 euro cents, something like that. I'm not kidding. So before even the real industry started, the games were already super popular as phenomenon.
So, like you said, quite different to how we how it's going right now. So it's interesting that you say you got into video games. Did you feel like you got into video games because of your brother? Would you have gotten into video games if it wasn't for Adrian and your brother being into video games the way they were? And in the end, also deciding to start one of the first Polish game companies?
I think it was supernatural because we all grew up without fathers.
Because they were working? Or
So no. My father died when I was little,
okay, yeah.
and similar situation to Adrian. So for me, the older kids were like idols to follow.
Yeah.
So when they introduced games to me, I fell in love. But they were avid gamers as well. So it was a supernatural ecosystem kind of to exist in, right? So I was always following them. However, they both were always inviting me into whatever they were doing.
Okay.
So even in the early 90s, they started to work on a game called Teen Agent, which happened later to be one of the very first hits in Poland. And they asked me, hey, we need a tester. Do you want to be a tester? And I was like, yeah, what a tester does. You play a game and you find out if something's wrong. Yeah, sure, I can do that, right? So I was 15 and already started as a tester. And a little bit later on, we've been working on a game called The Prince and the Coward, a classic point-and-click adventure based on a story by a Polish author. And they needed an animator, so I was like, yeah, I want to do that. So I had no clue how to do that. So I found, of course, illegal copy of a program called Animator Pro. And I just, after hours, I was 18 back then, so after high school, I was just studying how this program works, and I learned how to animate frame by frame, and I did that. And it was super interesting.
It's the very essence of game development, figuring out stuff, not using necessarily illegal software, but figuring out stuff on your own. So it's interesting that you have that intrinsic motivation to learn. So what's interesting to me is also why did Adrian and your brother wanted to start a company? You said the first games were point-and-click adventures. Was that because that was a genre they loved, they appreciated, or was that because it was easy to make, or what was the idea behind that?
The very first game was called Tajemnica Statuetki, which I think we can translate to Secret of a Statue.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just made in a technique that they photographed different locations and then later on programmed clickable objects on those photographs. So that was I guess, the easiest and the simplest method to actually make a game. So I think in the first place, the technical challenge was there. So. Yeah. They already knew how to program, so how to make simple animations and so forth. But still, it took a year of work. They were both at the Technical University in Wrocław, which is in southwestern Poland. So I think it was relatively simply easy to make. But since then, the market, like I said, was already developed for players, not for selling games, because everything was easy to get legally and illegally at the same time.
Yeah.
I know this is weird, but like I said, the copyright was cleared in 96, I think.
So that's another interesting thing. What was their idea of? They just wanted to make games for games creation's sake, because when they started out, there was no way of turning this into a business model since there was no copyright.
Well, it was more like that they were really crazy gamers. We've been following everything coming from the West. I remember the first Civilization, when we already bought PCs, was insanely popular. I can't remember which year it was, 90-something. So anything coming from the West was insanely popular. And I mean hundreds, if not millions of players, but probably, 10 legal copies sold, something like that. Yeah. But anyhow, since they were crazy gamers, they simply followed what they really loved and decided to be a developer and invited me quickly in. Mm-hmm. So I made back then it was a more choice of a heart rather than any conscious decision, just to, okay, I want to make games too. And 30 years later, I'm still working in games, so I guess that had an influence.
I think there's still interest it's still interesting to make games that are coming from the heart today.
Yeah. But just to explain, the very first game was sold legally because made by a Polish company, distributed in Poland. But it was a phenomenon, so it was covered all over the media. Gaming newspapers were quite popular despite the fact of not having legal market. Yeah. So this game was covered widely, and the next one, Teen Agent, even more than that, and we even found a publisher abroad, so we kind of started, spreading and growing.
As well. Yeah,
yes.
And growing.
So this is how it started, but purely from the passion.
Yeah. So you mentioned that those co-founders went on to do great things, Adrian. So you really had that front seat of the first developments in the Polish game dev scene. So when fast forward a couple of years, because you mentioned to me that all those things, the animation work, the testing, the writing, they were all temporary gigs, were all short assignments, and so you also did that while you were going to university, and you were actually studying journalism. That's correct?
Yes, that's correct. And I even finished.
You never finished. Never finished.
I even finished.
Oh, you even finished?
Yeah, somehow.
Which was not a given thing to do at that point.
No, I was just more into life of a young person, so parties, enjoyment.
Outside of the game dev scene.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I was also trying to, make a living out of what I really know best. So I was studying and working at the same time. So I was a translator for different games published already legally in Poland. Like, for instance, Heroes of Might and Magic the Third. So I got a job for translating from English to Polish, or Lesut Larry series, and at the same time testing different games at Metropolis. One was particularly popular in our part of the world, which was Gorky 17. So, it was still before the internet distribution era. So the old-time distribution that needed box editions put on shelves and so on. And it sold incredibly well. Imagine or not, it was a best-selling game in Russia. Partially, I think, because of the title, because Gorky. Nevertheless, it was quite a good game. So yeah, and from this to another until when I finished the university, I started to work full-time on games, being a writer, scenario writer, and PR guy at the same time.
Everything that required words.
Joining both, and even a designer. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. So the company, even though when copyright lived, the company grew to a 50, 60 people Metropolis, and then around 27 something, then it ended. It got acquired by CD Projekt, and a while later, your brother and some other people decide to start something new, start 11-bit. Was the idea to start 11-bit studios to be a continuation of what you've been doing at Metropolis, or was the idea, or we want to do something completely different?
So it was 2009, and we were all at CD Projekt back then,
Yeah.
and we had our own project within the CD Projekt Group that the board decided to cancel. A painful moment because I was the narrative lead of that project. Anyhow, it was the era when Steam started to be used as a popular distribution platform, but nothing similar to what we have now. So we thought that we know how to make games. We have an idea of make small yet original games and use the power of marketing the CD Projekt has. But somehow they didn't feel that vision. We're still in a very good relations with all the founders of CD Projekt and so on, but decided to leave. So shortly after, Grzegorz and the other folks, they told me, you know, we're starting a new company. Do you want to join? And I was like, sure, yeah, let's ride. And that's how we started 11-bit. So formally, I am not the founder, but I am at the company since the very first day. And the idea was to make small original games. I guess we're going to refer to it a little bit later, and use digital distribution. So we would forget the old model of distribution. So looking for a publisher and, you know, all these box distribution, physical copies and so on, not really. So the idea was to focus on digital distribution and make small, smart games in an agile way. So small agile team, that was the very first idea that quickly evolved into something a little bit more well thought, I'd say. And it's even in the name of the company. So,
yeah.
So it's 11-bit. So the idea was to make things that are unusual. Bits are even, 2-bit, 4-bit, 8-bit. So we thought joining 11 with bits is an uneven, with an even number is an unusual connection, because we thought we would make small, unusual games, relatively small, of course, far away from AA or you name it. So the idea was, okay, what's unusual? For instance, to take a genre and put it upside down, or combine two genres that are not really fitting to each other at a first glance, but maybe if you think, well, they could work. So quickly, there was this idea by Przemek, who's our current CEO, to take a tower defense game and make it a tower offense game. And we did it.
That was Anomaly Warzone Earth.
That was Anomaly Warzone Earth.
Yeah.
So it was released 15 years ago. So you need to know that back then there was like one debut on Steam per 3 or 4 days. So it's hard to imagine, yeah. But good times, because every new game had a proper visibility on Steam. Like for at least few days, it was a new title on a major tile on the Steam carousel. So every new title had a proper visibility. So unfortunately, and I must say sadly, it was way easier back then to get attention from players, from media. Yeah. I think it was a very good game, nevertheless. And we've made a very well-thought mobile version, because it could be just quickly controlled via one tap. Yeah. And that was a very successful one.
And also probably the same thing went for mobile. The mobile ecosystem at that point, or the mobile storefronts, weren't as full and as loaded as they were today. So it was also easier to get discovered that way. It's interesting that you say to me, we wanted to be small and agile and do smaller projects, yet at this point, 11-bit is closing into 300 people.
Yeah.
That's not well, maybe it's agile, but it's not really small. So where was that? Was that always the desire to start small and then keep growing? Or is that something just that happened along the way while you were making making the games and always coming up with ideas that needed larger teams, or how that will work?
Well, I guess it's one thing. It's business, and you know, we're a stock exchange company, so there's always the external push for growth.
But you weren't at the beginning, so there was once this conscious decision to go on the Polish stock market.
Yeah, that was a very conscious decision because it was relatively easy to get funding.
Right.
Because in Poland there's this special stock exchange market called New Connect, and it is less regulated than the main market, so it's more risky, but at least back then it was relatively easy to get money from the investors. And because the market is less regulated, it's exactly, you know, the bigger the risk, but the higher the win. So more or less, I think you could kind of compare it to a startup market, or even sort of Silicon Valley market. So private investors gathering together to invest in this, that startup. One in a few bursts out as a successful. We were the one, and it goes on. So there are a few factors: the external push for growth because of being the stock exchange company, but the internal need to fulfill our ambition as creators. Yeah. So simply, I mean, it's easy to say and feel a bit privileged, but when you have funds, you can make something that you can afford in a creative way, like more risky projects or projects requiring more resources to be realized. And I don't just mean financial, but time, you know, it's more iteration periods and so on. So I think the idea was one thing to have a stock exchange company for easy funding.
Yes.
Of course, relatively easy because there's a lot of legal work on one hand, but then relatively easy to get funding. Yeah. And I think we, on a side note, we spoiled the market with our success to some extent, because then there were expectations for other companies to, you know, to burst as large as we did, and that rarely happens. But most importantly, we're game creators in the first place. So we wanted to have a self-sustainable company able to reach for any idea that we could think of, right? So of course there has to be balance in it, but being the creators is the first internal need. You know,
and talking,
express somehow.
Talking about having, you mentioned having a lot of funds and having the freedom to spend a lot of time in prototyping, a lot of iteration, a lot of pre-production. Of course, Anomaly Warzone Earth and the follow-ups and the mobile versions did well, but the breakout hit, of course, was this War of Mine.
Yeah, that's true. However, the mobile version of Anomaly sold very well. I think we quickly crossed 1 million copies. However, we've been selling it for $3. So still big volume, relatively small revenue, but it allowed us to grow with small steps. Yes. Because we started as 12 people, and at the moment of this War of Mine, we were around 30. Yeah. So from 2010 to 2004, from 12 to 30, well, I would say relatively reasonable growth. But yeah, this War of Mine was a huge breakthrough, and already a change of the idea, because we felt that in this unusual approach to making games by flipping genres or mixing genres, we kind of became repetitive. So we needed a new idea. And we had a prototype of a game called Shelter, and it was a game about people protecting each other in a shelter. and it was okay-ish, but lacking a distinctive idea. So we had a brainstorm at the company where we all sat down, literally everyone, and my brother said, you know, I was reading this interview with a guy from Mostar in Bosnia about his life in Yugoslavian war, and this is a thrilling interview, and there's a lot about it in the emotional human side, how heavy it is and how we don't expect what is really happening when war breaks out, and let's make a game about it. Of course, it was a little bit longer discussion, but literally everyone at the company, at the team said, this is brilliant, let's do it. So this brainstorm ended up in a super quick decision, let's make this game about people trying to survive in war. Interestingly, the very first name was Kosovo, because back then the war in Kosovo were a hot topic across the media. Quickly we thought that it's not a good idea because of the political context, and that we would move the game from real setting to the fictional setting, and to talk about a fictional conflict, but yet very relatable to reality.
Universal. Yeah.
Exactly, to make it universal. And I thought that it ringed me, I needed a title, and I was thinking about personal war, because this game is really about how you go through such a unusual, experience, and we try to simulate an experience of a regular person in horrible time. And that ringed me a bell of a song, Sweet Child of Mine, by Guns N' Roses. So I combined this My War into This War of Mine, and that's how we started, to roll it.
I don't think Axl Rose was singing about the war.
No.
In Kosovo,
I specifically mean the ending of Mine.
I understand, yes, of Mine. No. The survival aspect and the ethical consequences that come, and the ethical choices that players can make, and the dilemmas players are faced with, have been a constant theme throughout the follow-up works. Is that something that, because when we talked before, you mentioned that we never expected this War of Mine to do as well as it did.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
was that one of the factors that you thought, okay, this is what really resonated with people, that this is a design thing that we need to take with us in pretty much every project that we do?
So the sequence was slightly different, because when we had this idea for a game, that was not the only thinking behind it. But as gamers, we were noticing that we're getting older, 30, 40 something at the moment, and that we require something different from games. So not only pure fun, not only pure enjoyment, but something more serious in a way that you require more from other forms of storytelling, be it films. Like, there's no way you only watch comedies and pure fun. I mean, of course, some people may do, but no, there's a reason you go for a drama story to the cinema or streaming or whatever. That, you as a consumer of culture, as a human being, you require something different as well. So why wouldn't be making a game in a similar approach, like very serious, telling a story about different emotions other than just pure enjoyment, escapism, fun, stuff like that, and also with an approach that a game shouldn't be eating as much time of yours as sometimes AAAs do. Not because it's not a AAA, but because we don't have that much time for playing. So we thought, let's make a game for someone like us, people having children, life, and having just a, few, maybe 10 hours a week to play. So something that is engaging and emotionally involving at the same time. And hence the idea was born to not to make 11-bit games as games being unusual connections like 11 and bit, but something more serious. And we called we forged a term for it called meaningful entertainment. So games that are games, very good games in the first place, but with an ambition to tell you something or to tell a serious story or tackle some serious social issue, something like that, right? So we chose this to be our way specifically, and this started with this War of Mine.
Yeah.
So that was the sequence, and yet, yes, you said we didn't expect. I mean, I said, and you brought this.
And then I repeated it.
Yeah. And that's true. So I remember our motivation was, we knew that this is a very challenging topic for a game, yet we knew we are making it with a proper respect for the topic, because the theme of people suffering in war might be easily ruined if you move the game too close to a violent game or too close to a fighting game. That was not about it. So we knew that if we stay faithful and true to that topic and with a proper respect, and we focus on what we want to say, that it should probably pay off, because it was done in the best possible way we could have made it. But then, so we had like this approach. Okay, this is a good game. We all know, we all feel it. It's a good game as a game. Like
Right.
it's engaging. It keeps you. It wants you to play further. But honestly, you know, the game was released among a Far Cry, a new Far Cry franchise, and Call of Duty, and this War of Mine outsold both. So it was like, whoa, yeah, really, we did not expect it at all. And even further, you know, the game budget was €500,000. So for us, the biggest budget in 11-bit history, because back in Metropolis era we had bigger games, but the biggest in 11-bit history. And even last year, the revenue from this game was like €2 million, something like that, and it's 12-year-old. Of course, it's been higher across the years, but it's phenomenal, because usually such games, you know, the long tail, of course, is there, but it tends to go down over the years. While last year we had revenue even higher than in 2024. It might have a little to do with the charity DLC that we have released on the 10th anniversary, but still, it's amazing simply how it lasts over years.
And unfortunately, it's also the universal theme and the timeless theme of war, and war is still happening everywhere, and war is happening more and more. So maybe that also has something to do with it, because people recognize these situations and want to feel empathetic about zones or war zones that they know exist, but cannot travel to themselves or don't want to travel themselves. But yeah, like you said, the biggest game for 11-bit. But between all the games that 11-bit has done, Anomaly, this War of Mine, Frostpunk, recently The Altars, there was never a miss, if I may say so.
No, actually we had.
You had a miss?
Or games that we were struggling in the long term to pay off.
Okay.
So I remember that at that point we learned that we always need 3 scenarios. Super positive, the one that we call realistic, or a pessimistic scenario. Okay, what happens if a game does not succeed at the first launching period? So the pessimistic scenario usually included, okay, let's think about multiple channel distributions. So it's I mean, I always think that development, marketing, and business, it's all part of one bigger thing. Yeah. We tend to think in a holistic way and see things as, you know, combine parts of one bigger experience. Anyhow, the pessimistic scenario is related to the business. So We thought about multiple distribution channels, so not Steam only, about quick porting to different systems such as Android, iOS, consoles, about discounts and long-term price policy of a game. So Anomaly was a big hit. Later, sequels to the game were okay-ish, nothing spectacular, but okay-ish. Anomaly 2 probably would be a failure if not later port to mobile, because it worked really well on Android and iOS.
Right. Maybe let me rephrase. Like every time you introduce a new IP, every time you introduce a new, then that was significantly successful. So there must be something about the way that you're approaching these games, and it could be in this meaningful games philosophy, it could be something else that makes it work, because there are similarities between this War of Mine, Frostpunk, The Alters, but there's also a lot of differences, and yet every time it seems to catch on with an audience.
Yeah, there are two key factors, and I think I should stress this is very important from my experience. One is to understand your DNA. So what is the company's culture, the internal culture that influences organization, communication, the way you treat each other, the way you talk to each other, what are the borders you can or cannot cross, and understanding what is the common goal of the team. So, and this is what I would call DNA. And then there's what comes out of the DNA is, like I said, this common goal. So if we thought that, okay, we're making meaningful entertainment, we have proved that we are pretty good at it, so we should follow, but also always remember that there is no golden pattern for, be successful every time. There is no way that everything you touch, like the Midas king, would turn to gold. It's not like that, of course. So we compare ourselves to musicians. And if you have a good album, the next album shouldn't be better than the previous one, because you can set expectations for yourself that you later would probably be unable to meet, or set bar insanely high. This is not how it works. So with every new title, we just try to make it the best we can, but forgetting that there's some bar that we need to jump over. So with every new, it's like, okay, we have this DNA, we're good at it, we focus at it. But the idea, that there's another thing important in our DNA is that there's always the idea. We always begin with an idea. The shorter the idea to explain, the better. Ideally, in one sentence. In The Alters, it didn't work. The game is really good and performing really well, so we're super happy. But we loved the idea, but we knew it would be hard to communicate because the idea is longer to explain.
I remember,
and we had problems with it, but it's a different topic for a different kind of a story.
Yes.
Nevertheless, we always begin with an idea, and if everybody feels the idea instantly, we go that path. Yeah. But in all this, staying true to the DNA is the key. And sometimes that's also remembering that what we do is risky, because it's show business, right? We create culture in a way Hollywood does create culture. Like, please remember that I often use the parallel to film industry because it shows how some things can be easily explained. Hollywood is Marvel movies, but Hollywood is also Godfather. Or
old Hollywood, yeah.
But like there, or lately the one few years ago, which is a perfect example, with Benedict Cumberbatch, Dog. What's the name of the movie? The Power of the Dog. Do I recall correctly?
Could be.
It was nominated for an Oscar for the script. Nevertheless, what I mean is that sometimes a movie can be purely, entertaining work like Marvel movies,
Yes.
and can be really ambitious work of culture.
Yeah.
And so in the end, you don't know the outcome, what people will love. You will check it when it goes out, but you never know. So you create because you believe in it, you want to create, you know how to do it, but in the end, it's always risky.
And it's always different because the process, you have to go through it every time. You have to have the iteration, you have the onboarding, you have to figure out the new things. So it's, even though you have this DNA and this meaningful philosophy, it's every time it's different.
So pardon me, just
no worries.
like what I mean is that it's not a super optimistic way along the way, because I've been working on around 30 games in my life, and at least few were failures, at least few were shut down before finishing. So that's a hard way to learn, but nevertheless, it's like being in the trenches. It gives you experience, but you need to go through it anyway. The successful ones can be dangerous because of the success bias, You look at the surviving entities rather than the ones that failed.
Yeah.
So learning from failure is more painful, but more useful in the long term.
Yeah.
So this is what I mean, but looking at the history and the DNA, what really made us the way we are, right? And what we do. So 11-bit, indeed, we have a few notable successes, but every new one is trying to approach some new idea using the old experiences, but keeping in mind that we're in a risky industry, especially now when the market is so loaded. There surely needs to be more push on marketing than it used to be back in the days. I would say it was easier. Now it's more challenging.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, times are tougher indeed now. And does that mean when times are tougher that you were talking about this balance between the creative side and the risk and the business side? Is in 11-bit also, when the times get tougher, is there more emphasis on the business side? Do you have to lower down that risk a little because you're working now on, there's going to be a remake of This War of Mine. You're also working on a re-envisioning of the first Frostpunk in Frostpunk 8086. That looks like a little bit like we're going to take it a little safer and we're going to continue working on that existing IP.
Well, so it's not exactly like that, because we're still in a, I think, privileged situation comparing to many companies, because we have strong financial backup.
Yeah.
So that means we're actually in a field project. Keep in mind, we are working on a new game in the Frostpunk universe, and that's not 1886, so that's something completely new. Yeah. And that one, that's interesting, because that one is risky, but at the same time, I feel like that's very exciting. There's this, well,
you can talk about it.
No. I think we all feel it as creators, that sometimes we feel there's this magic at the end of the rainbow, right? And you don't know what it is going to be, but the journey will be exciting. So this is the one. The remake of Frostpunk might be a more safe bet, but on the other hand, we have built a strong IP and there's a huge audience behind it. Yeah. So on one hand, yes. On the other, there's still a big part of the team which feels very strongly tied to Frostpunk. Like those guys feel it's their child, right? Yeah. I don't feel it that much anymore, because the last one I was working on was Frostpunk 2, and I quit in, I think last year, moving to this education and culture and charity part at 11-bit. Yeah. Nevertheless, yes, there has to be this balance, and it's very risky, and I don't think there's a golden rule behind it anyway. So I think, at least looking at how I used to work with Grzegorz, my brother, who used to be the CEO up until 6, 7-ish years ago, and with Przemek, with whom I'm working with for 25 years by now, I think, who's our current CEO, that there has to be careful judgment, but also understanding that everything is still one organism, one body, right? So the game is the development itself, the game, the idea in a proper organization, properly financed, properly structured and organized and internally communicated. And there has to be a healthy balance between all of it, because sometimes, sometimes you might be in a very successful moment, like we've been after This War of Mine launch or Frostpunk, and sometimes not so optimistic. So we try to consider all the scenarios and approach them in a proper way. Yet somehow we need to remember the risky part that it is, and moreover it has to be, because if you are taking too safe approach, you might end up with a game that is too generic maybe. So the creative, the risky part, at least that's my point of view. It has to be. And we paid the price for it, because, working on games for 30 years, we had a few moments where the company, not this one, but Metropolis, had financial issues, and we've been struggling to make it work again, right? So it's not always super optimistic. And even at CDP, I was at the moment where CD Projekt were in financial crisis, and they had to borrow a huge credit from a bank to make the company roll further. Luckily, when they released The Witcher 2, it was insanely successful and allowed them to pay the credit bank, the bank credit, and grow further. But it was a problematic moment. They laid off big part of the company. They closed internal teams. The morale went down because of it. So it was.
That's also interesting, because in a studio that's been 15 years, you've been running for 15, well, part of for 15 years, and there's a lot of Polish studios and a lot of talent. How do you keep that institutional knowledge? Because it's important to keep the team together. You mentioned the Frostpunk team, the people who worked on the first Frostpunk see this as a child. Is there a certain way you go about at the studio that to guarantee and keep that institutional knowledge?
Yeah, that's very important, because and sometimes it's a blurry area, because you know what the company's values might be, you know which particular people constitute the culture and bring those values to life, but then someone may tell you, I'm leaving, I want to change in my life, and you need to reshape the band. And I often use the parallel to music, that you have a band of 6 players and the drummer is leaving, and you need to find a new drummer. So the music will be slightly different, the style will change, but the band needs to stay alive, right? So inheriting the institutional knowledge is the key, by making sure it goes down to people that join the team and they soak in what we are as 11-bit, and that needs to be cherished. I think it's a good word, cherished, not maintained only, but even cherished. Because sometimes the DNA may be watered down, the values may be blurred. So we often, maybe often is not a good word, but we talk about it often enough to make sure that we still remember, we understand, and it's spread all over the team. And for instance, we know that many people joined 11-bit across the years because of what we do. For them, the gravity was those guys. I can have a good example. Well, like we have a lot of Ukrainians on our team. They joined because we decided deliberately, purposely to help Ukraine in their effort. And we're donating big amount of money till this day. For them, it was a proof that those guys mean what they do.
Yeah.
This meaningful entertainment is not a shallow word. They are doing something. So this is the gravity pulling people in and keeping them in the mission that we do. Because business, this is obvious. We make games because we have families, we need to provide, we make a living out of creating and selling games. But this is not everything. We create culture. We need to prove that what we do is, beyond business, because for many people, creation is and I think for absolute majority of the people, creating is the most important thing. So it's all about the culture, not about the money. The money is a obvious side effect,
not always
very
obvious,
wanted
yeah.
side effect,
Yeah.
necessary side effect, but still in the first place it's about the culture.
Yeah.
In any way.
Somewhere where that meaningful games philosophy also shines through, and you already briefly touched upon it, is that you transferred out of the communication and PR departments to run the charity and the education efforts going on at 11-bit, and that even ended up in this war of mine being recognized officially to be used in Polish education, in Polish classrooms. So why do you think, why is that personally important to you? Why do you think that that's something that you wanted to pursue?
This is more nuanced, because this very game started to be a cultural phenomenon somehow beyond us, but it got back to us. So we thought we would tailor a free license for educational institutions to use not this game, but any of our games for free, which is also the case with the alters, as a interesting side fact. Anyhow, colleges, high school, universities from all around the world approached us if they can use the game in education. And we were like, sure, why not? So we don't have any money from it. In fact, we are even adding to it because this is the part of the mission that, I think it just proves that what we're doing really makes sense, right? Because you can look at the spreadsheet and all the numbers and money, and yeah, okay, you have to do it, I get it, but if that would be the goal, I would definitely quit the industry. So we need to remember we are artists and we create, right? I think, we're the Jedis to bring the balance to the galaxy. And anyhow, we've been even approached by the Prime Minister back then that the phenomenon of this game is exceptional, and it's been proven in different countries that it can be used in education, especially in Norway, but I guess we can talk later about it. And they suggested it could be added to the high school curriculum, so we were super excited to do that. It took 2 years of a bureaucratic struggle to make it happen, but it did in 2022. However, with my love, Eva, who's over there, we started a foundation, and our new project is Games in Education, which is exactly this, but on a bigger scale. So it's not about games specifically made for education or making edutainment, it's the other way around. Yeah. So it's about taking a game that proved already to be a great game. So at least the problem with edutainment is that it's often boring. Like, it's supposed to work in education, but I see even my kids that they are not interested in those games because they are boring as games. So they prefer to just play games that are proven as good games. Yeah. So we thought we should follow this path because we're not going to stop children playing games, and we should be finding examples of very valuable games and use them in education, such as this War of Mine. So we are tailoring a program called Games in Education under Ministry of Culture to bring specific Polish games into our system. And that's obviously this War of Mine, but also The Witcher 3, which is not confirmed yet, but we talk with CDP, and they are super excited to do that, but they have a long legal process, so I hope we can just make it as soon as possible. But also the vanishing of Ethan Carter by the astronauts, martial law game, Papetura, which is an indie Polish gem. I hope you know it, but if not, it's an artistic masterpiece because it's a hand-crafted paper animations frame by frame made into a game, Papetura. Nice. It won multiple awards. Really, it's a masterpiece. And also Apocalypsis, another indie game which speaks about medieval themes in a game. And these 6 games, we work with teachers to make it as a foundation for lessons using games or based on games. Yep. So we're building up upon it, also to remind that really what we do is culture. This is strong part of our identity. Yep. So my mission at the company is to exactly this, to put a spotlight on games as a culture.
Yep. Feels very true to everything that 11-bit has been doing and probably will continue to do for the foreseeable future.
I hope so.
Thank you, Pawel.
Thank you very much.
We have some time for questions from the audience. Oh, we don't have time for questions from the audience, says Alessandra.
That's Alessandra.
And we all have to listen to Alessandra. Everyone knows that.
Yeah, I'd like to point out that we've met a long time ago working with PlayLogic because she was there, and since then we're friends. And that was Infernal game, the last game of Metropolis. We got very bad reviews, but it was a good game.
So no time for questions? Okay, great. No worries. So Pawel will be definitely around. If you have questions for him, you can go up to him and talk to him. Thank you very much. And
I'm hanging around, so
enjoy the rest of INDIGO.
Happy to meet you. Thank you.